The notice arrived on a Tuesday, sandwiched between a coupon for discounted oil changes and a flyer for the local pizza joint. It was a formal, laser-printed declaration from the Highland Lakes Homeowners Association, and it accused me, Leo Maxwell, of orchestrating a repeated and intentional sonic disruption of a residential zone. A sonic disruption. Me, the guy who spends 90% of his life wearing noise-canceling headphones to avoid hearing my own thoughts. The culprit? My doorbell. I stared at the paperwork, then walked over to the offending device, which was mounted innocently next to my craftsman-style front door. It was a standard beige electronic doorbell, the kind you buy in a twin pack at Lowe's for $39.99. When pressed, it emitted a perfectly cheerful, utterly generic chime that sounded like 4 quick, digital raindrops. Ding-dong, bing-bong. I'd lived in this house for 5 years, and that little digital tune had been the soundtrack to everything from pizza deliveries to the occasional Mormon missionary. Never once had I considered it a weapon of mass auditory destruction. But according to the HOA, and specifically the signatory, Mrs. Beatrice Henderson, a.k.a. Karen, a.k.a. Ms. Perpetual Complaint, a.k.a. the woman whose primary hobby appeared to be weaponizing laminated documents, my doorbell was a menace. The violation read, "The current tone, identified as chime 4, traditional quartal progression, is described as unsettling and possessing an unnatural, tinny resonance which contributes to neighborhood stress and lowers the ambient property values." I read that sentence 3 times. Unnatural, tinny resonance. Look, I'm a regular guy. I pay my dues, I mow my lawn, and I don't leave my garbage cans out until Thursday morning. I hate petty bureaucracy, and I really hate being told what color sock I can wear in my own garage. My mindset, generally, is to follow the rules until the rules become demonstrably, aggressively stupid. This was that moment. Karen, by the way, lives 2 houses down. Her porch is visible from mine. She has a perpetually immaculate yard and a garden gnome that stares directly at my mailbox. Her complaint wasn't just aggressive. It was absurdly specific. I was pretty sure the jingle only lasted about 1 to 1.8 seconds. I tried the compliant, reasonable solution first. I pulled the cover off the doorbell unit, flipped the tiny plastic switches, and changed the chime to Melody 1, Westminster Quarters. It was a classic, majestic sound, far more dignified than the quartal progression. I even rang it once, just to test. Bong, 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 bong. Very British. Very stately. 2 days later, I got the second notice. Same courier, same heavy cardstock, same HOA logo. This one, however, was stamped, "Repeat offense. Escalation of nuisance." Karen's new complaint? The Westminster Quarters jingle reminds her of the grandfather clock in her childhood home, which she associates with highly stressful family dinners. That was the line. Logic had officially left the chat. The second notice wasn't just a threat. It carried a concrete monetary penalty, a $250 fine, recurring every week until the offending noise-making device was removed or replaced with an HOA-approved non-electronic low-decibel visual notification system. I was sitting at my kitchen counter, clutching the laminated absurdity, when I called the HOA office. The person on the other end, a weary-sounding woman named Carol, answered on the 5th ring. "Highland Lakes HOA, how can I direct your misery?" she sighed. "Hi, Carol. It's Leo Maxwell, 1228 Juniper Lane. I'm calling about violation 44A, the one concerning my sonic disruption." "Oh, Mr. Maxwell." The doorbell. Yes. Look, Leo, between you and me, I'm looking at the file right now. You're currently in a doorbell war with Mrs. Henderson. A war I did not start, Carol. I changed the chime. I went from tinny digital to dignified analog. And now she's complaining about stressful family dinners. Yeah, I know, Carol said, her voice dropping conspiratorially. She filed a 10-page affidavit. She even attached a timeline of the stressful dinners. Apparently, they climaxed with her uncle getting drunk and trying to fight a ceiling fan. It's a lot, Leo. So, to be clear, this entire escalation, this fine, this talk of an HOA-approved low-decibel system, that's all Karen? 100% Karen. She's threatened to call the zoning board and the mayor. She's calling it noise pollution terrorism. I rubbed my temples. This wasn't about the chime anymore. This was about power. This was about a woman who had weaponized a community association to control the small noises of my existence. I felt the slow burn of righteous, ridiculous vengeance igniting in my chest. Okay, Carol, thank you. I'm going to comply with the directive to remove the offending device. Tell Karen she wins the digital chime war. I hung up, feeling strangely calm. Non-electronic, low-decibel visual notification system. That was the language. That was the loophole. I grabbed my laptop and plunged into the abyss of online shopping, initially looking for something sensible, a big silent push button, maybe a visual light signal, something reasonable. But then the rage scrolling took over. I typed, loudest non-electronic bell. The first few results were church bells. Too tall, too traditional. Then, the algorithm, sensing my dark intent, served it up. A glorious, polished, 4-foot-wide brass paste gong, specifically labeled as a Feng Shui Harmony gong, complete with a hand-painted wooden stand. I stared at the image. It wasn't a doorbell. It wasn't a chime. It was a ceremonial musical instrument. It was acoustic. It was traditional. And when struck, it did not produce a tinny resonance. It produced a vibrating, tectonic wave that could probably register on the Richter scale. My internal monologue was practically a PowerPoint presentation of justification. Complaint: 1. Doorbell is electronic and annoying. Solution: replace it with something that is not electronic and is technically silent when not struck. Check and mate. HOA rule: must use a non-electronic, low-decibel visual notification system. The loophole: a gong isn't a system, it's an instrument. And since the sound is a single, pure, low-frequency bong, and not a chiming melody that evokes familial trauma, it's not the same thing. Plus, the brass is highly visual. I'd fulfilled the requirements in the most literal, absurd way possible. I immediately clicked Add to Cart. The price made me gasp. It was more than my mortgage payment. But then I saw the shipping cost. An additional $600 for white glove, freight lift delivery. My impulsive purchase was now escalating into a full-blown financial commitment to spite Karen. I paused. Was I really going to spend $3,000 to install a weaponized doorbell? Yes. Yes, I was. Because the alternative was letting Karen win, and that was a fate worse than bankruptcy. I hit purchase. The plan solidified instantly. This couldn't just be a gong hung on a hook. It needed to be a statement. It needed a proper, custom-engineered, weather-resistant structure. A monument to petty revenge. This wasn't just a prank. It was an installation. 3 days later, the chaos began. The gong, I capitalized it in my mind now, because it had earned it. arrived in a crate the size of a smart car. The delivery was scheduled, but the driver, a burly guy named Gary, clearly hadn't been prepared for the sheer absurdity of the contents. "You ordered this?" Gary asked, sweating, as the hydraulic lift lowered the massive wooden box onto my driveway. "The Feng Shui Harmony Gong?" "Yes, just a little yard decor." I gave him my most innocuous suburban dad smile. Gary signed the paperwork with a shake of his head. "We got a special instruction on the manifest. Contents sensitive to vibration. Buddy, I swear, I think I heard this thing rattle when we went over a speed bump in Iowa." As he was wheeling the crate up my small walkway, the dolly caught on a paving stone. The crate lurched, and a low, terrifying whoom emanated from inside, a sound that didn't just vibrate the air. It vibrated my teeth. Gary dropped the dolly handle and backed away 2 steps. What the hell was that? "Just harmonic resonance. It's supposed to do that." I paid him, tipped him excessively for his PTSD, and watched him drive away, probably updating his resume to anything but Gong delivery. Moving the gong into the living room was a nightmare. It took me, a neighbor I bribed with beer, who asked 0 questions, bless his heart, and 30 minutes of grunting. Finally, the massive brass disc stood gleaming in my living room, taking up a terrifying amount of visual space. I had to drape a velvet cloth over it just to stop myself from staring at the shimmering surface, imagining the destruction it was about to wreak. The gong itself was a thing of terrifying beauty. 4 feet across, polished to a mirror shine, with an etched dragon motif. It came with a thick, rope-wrapped mallet, the size of a small cabbage, but I knew I couldn't just leave that out on the porch for anyone to swing. I needed a system, a professional structure. A gong stand worthy of its malicious purpose, complete with a discreet yet robust pull-cord mechanism for the striker. I realized my project was no longer a weekend DIY revenge. It was a custom fabrication job. My first attempt to hire help was, predictably, a comedy of errors. Me, on the phone. "Yes, I need a custom installation of an exterior, weather-resistant mounting system." Contractor 1. "Roofing, siding, gutters?" Me. "No, it's for a ceremonial musical instrument, near the front door. Yes, like a doorbell." Contractor 1. Dial tone. After 3 similar calls, I realized I needed a certain type of contractor. One who was bored, cynical, and desperate enough for a good story. I found Tony and Mike Custom Builds on Yelp. Their motto was, "We build what you pay for, even if it's stupid." Perfect. Tony was a slab of human granite in a faded Iron Maiden t-shirt, all forearms and skepticism. Mike was skinnier, wearing glasses, and carried a clipboard like a shield. They showed up exactly on time. "Leo Maxwell?" Tony grunted. "You called about a custom freestanding structure for a ceremonial musical instrument?" "Bespoke acoustic notification system," I corrected smoothly. "Yes, come on in." I led them through the house to the backyard, avoiding the living room where the gong was currently terrifying my cat. I showed them where I wanted the stand, right next to the walkway, easily visible. "It's got to be solid," I explained, pulling out my crude blueprint, a piece of printer paper with a stick figure pulling a rope attached to a giant circle. 4-foot-wide brass, needs to withstand high winds and provide stable acoustic performance. Tony squinted at my drawing. "And you're hanging a church bell out here?" "A gong, Tony. A symphony gong." Mike, the guy with the clipboard, finally spoke, his voice dry as plaster dust. "Mr. Maxwell, in 25 years we've built decks, patios, pergolas, and one very elaborate dog mansion. We have never once been asked to build an external musical notification structure. Is this a prank? Are you filming a TikTok? I assure you, gentlemen, this is dead serious. This is about compliance with HOA regulations." I pulled out the original violation notice and handed it to them. Tony read the phrase, "unnatural, tinny resonance," and actually barked a laugh. "Seriously? This neighborhood is wild. Okay, so look, we need treated lumber, custom, iron brackets, and a foundation. And you want a self-retracting striker mechanism?" Precisely. When the cord is pulled, the striker needs to hit the exact sweet spot and then retreat instantly so the gong can resonate freely. Think of it as a high-precision, spring-loaded single-action trigger for chaos. Mike was already scribbling on his clipboard, his brow furrowed. "We have to custom engineer the striker's pivot point. And the cable pull? It has to feel like a doorbell, not a tug-of-war." He looked at Tony. "Absurdity tax is going to be high on this one, T." "The absurdity tax is fine," I interrupted, pulling out my phone. "Look, I need this done fast, discreetly, and flawlessly. I will pay an extra 20% over the top quote for confidentiality and speed. Just tell me what it's going to cost to get this gong mounted and ready to ring before the next HOA meeting." The final quote was astronomical. It included custom acoustically sensitive framing, weather sealing for musical instruments, and a line item simply titled WTF Factor. "So," Tony said, extending a calloused hand, "we're building a $4,000 solution to a $39 problem because your neighbor doesn't like a digital jingle." "Exactly. It's not a problem, Tony. It's performance art." He took my hand and grinned, the first genuine smile I'd seen. "I like your style, Leo. We start Monday, just for the story." Monday morning, the suburban peace was shattered, not by a gong, but by the rhythmic, grinding sounds of construction. Tony and Mike arrived in a beat-up Ford F-350, unloading enough lumber and tools to build a small cabin. The immediate obstacle was the ground. I had planned for a deep foundation. "We gotta pour concrete for that weight, Leo," Tony said, wiping his brow. "That thing weighs like 200 pounds mounted. Can't just set it on patio stones." My internal panic spiked. "Concrete? The HOA needs a 45-day notice and 3 permits for concrete pours. Karen will spot that faster than a bald eagle spots a fish." Mike, the intellectual of the duo, tapped his pencil on the HOA notice. Rule 7.c, permanent structural additions must be accompanied by a concrete foundation. Keyword, permanent. We're going to build a heavy-duty, pressure-treated base supported by gravel and treated skids. We'll call it a mobile art installation that happens to be anchored to the ground by 500 pounds of river rock. Mobile art installation, I repeated, loving the legal gymnastics. Brilliant, Mike. The build was a spectacle. Tony was wrestling with massive lumber beams, and Mike was focused entirely on the striker mechanism. It became a kind of obsessive engineering project for them. See this, Leo? Mike pointed to a complicated assembly of springs and hinges. This is the heart of the beast. It's a tension-loaded pendulum. When you pull the rope, the striker snaps forward, hits the gong perfectly centered, and then, whoosh, the spring yanks it back instantly. That gives you maximum resonance time and prevents dampening. You've put more engineering into this than the entire space program in the 60s, I muttered. It's a doorbell, Tony chimed in from behind a beam, completely deadpan. Gotta be reliable. During the process, there was, inevitably, a mishap. Tony, distracted by a passing bird, or maybe just the sheer ridiculousness of the job, dropped a heavy-duty drill. It didn't hit the ground. It bounced off the vinyl siding of my house, leaving a small, crescent-shaped dent. "Ah, crap," Tony muttered. I stared at the dent, feeling a spike of anxiety. Karen is going to document that siding dent and send it to the UN Human Rights Council. Relax, Leo. We'll fill and repaint it. It'll be invisible. You don't understand. Her sight is calibrated to detect microaggressions and property imperfections at 200 yards. That dent is a beacon of defiance to her. The process continued, fueled by my paranoia and the contractor's grim determination. They installed the mounting brackets, polished, gleaming stainless steel, and meticulously aligned the Gong frame. Every day was a battle against time, precision, and the mounting tension of waiting for Karen's inevitable intervention. Karen, of course, was on high alert. I saw her shadow every morning, a flash of reflective vest and a telephoto lens poking out from behind her prized azalea bush. She didn't approach Tony or Mike, who looked like they'd eat her HOA packet for breakfast. Instead, she dispatched her poor, beaten-down husband, Gary Sr., no relation to the UP driver. Gary Sr. was a man whose soul had clearly checked out sometime around 1998. He shuffled up my driveway one afternoon while Tony was busy adjusting the striker. "Hey, Leo," Gary mumbled, avoiding eye contact with the half-finished, oddly ceremonial wooden structure. "Gary, how's the weather 2 houses down?" I asked, leaning against a post. Fine, B, my wife. She was just wondering what exactly you fellas are building here." "Oh, this?" I patted the wooden beam. "This is a mobile, outdoor, zero-emission, sound-based pedestrian signaling device. We're working on the acoustic integrity right now." Gary Sr. swallowed hard. "Right. A thing. B also wanted me to ask if that ding in your siding is up to code." I pointed to the crescent-shaped dent. "That is a professionally inflicted structural imperfection designed to reduce the surface tension and enhance the visual nonconformity of the installation, Gary. It's part of the art." Gary Sr. nodded slowly, his eyes already dead. "Right. Art. Got it. Well, I gotta go. The peonies need monitoring." He scuttled back across the lawn, reporting my nonsense back to his handler. That evening, just as the sun was setting and the Gong was being carefully unpacked from my living room, the inevitable happened. A black-and-white sedan from the local PD, lights off, rolled slowly down Juniper Lane. "Uh-oh," Mike muttered, tightening the last bolt on the striker. Tony didn't stop working, but he paused long enough to give me a dry look. "I told you this was going to happen. Felony chime replacement. Let's see if they're going to arrest a ceremonial musical instrument." The patrol car stopped right across the street. A uniformed officer got out, tall, stern, definitely not amused. "Everything all right here, gentlemen?" the officer asked, walking over. Leo, trying to sound like a normal, boring homeowner, stepped forward. "Perfectly fine, officer. Just finishing up a little project, installing a structural accent piece." The officer looked at the gleaming, 4-foot-wide brass circle that was now leaning against the wooden stand. It was spectacular. It demanded attention. "Looks like you're installing a very large decorative pot lid." "It's a gong, officer. A feng shui harmony gong. The neighborhood association requested I remove my electronic chime and replace it with a non-electronic visual system. I'm simply complying with the rules." The officer stared at the gong, then at my house, then back at the gong. He shook his head slightly, as if trying to clear water from his ears. "All right, look. We got a call about suspicious construction and a large metallic object being installed. Is this permanent?" "Mobile art installation, sir. It rests on skids, no concrete. Perfectly compliant." The officer sighed. He was clearly a veteran of suburban drama. "Okay. Well, don't install any cannons next, all right? Just keep the projects reasonable." He shrugged, utterly bewildered, and walked back to his car. Tony and Mike fist-bumped me. The gong was mounted. It gleamed, magnificent and menacing, right next to the front door. The pull cord, thick and braided, hung down invitingly. The sheer visual absurdity was breathtaking. On a typical suburban ranch house, amidst the tasteful hydrangeas and the manicured lawn, sat a piece of bronze symphony equipment worthy of a Buddhist temple. It was terrifying and beautiful. I was terrified. I was triumphant. I was ready. The moment had arrived. The gong was installed, and the HOA had approved the mobile art installation status with a footnote expressing extreme skepticism. The only thing left to do was ring it. But I couldn't just ring it for no reason. This had to be a legitimate use, a legal function of the doorbell replacement. I needed a delivery. I waited 2 agonizing days. I thought about having Tony or Mike ring it, but that wouldn't be authentic. It needed a stranger, a civilian, a hapless delivery person whose life was about to be changed forever by a single accidental act of percussive violence. I went online and ordered the most inconspicuous thing possible: a single black merino wool sock from a high-end clothing site. Priority shipping, of course. The delivery driver arrived at 11:30 a.m. on a Thursday. His name, according to his badge, was Kevin. He was young, probably college-aged, and had the 1,000-yard stare of someone who delivers 800 packages a day. He carried the tiny 6x6-inch cardboard box like it was a minor chore. Kevin walked up my path. He paused at the door, looked for the doorbell button, and found nothing but the empty hole where the electronic menace used to be. Then his eyes drifted to the left. He saw the gong. He froze. Kevin slowly walked toward the 4-foot disc, which was shimmering in the morning sun. He reached out a hesitant hand, then retracted it. He spotted the thick, braided pull cord hanging neatly next to a small, hand-lettered sign I'd made. Acoustic notification. Pull to ring. He looked over his shoulder at his van, as if hoping to find a manager to consult. He looked at the gong again. He sighed the deep, profound sigh of a man whose job has just gotten infinitely weirder. Kevin spoke into the air, clearly talking to himself. They said this neighborhood was strange, but a ceremonial bell? For a sock? I watched from the safety of my darkened living room window, gripping the velvet curtain. This was it, the moment of truth. Kevin squared his shoulders. He reached out, grabbed the rope, and gave it a decisive, businesslike tug. He treated it exactly like an old-fashioned pull-chain doorbell. The striker snapped forward. It hit the dead center of the brass disc. And then, the sound. It was not a chime. It was not a bong. It was the sound of the universe hiccuping. It was a through that felt less like a sound and more like a physical event. The low, guttural frequency rolled off the brass, hit my house, and vibrated the glass in the window I was standing behind. It wasn't painfully loud, but it was all-encompassing. It was a noise that demanded reverence and immediate, panicked attention. The sound wave seemed to ripple through the neighborhood's carefully controlled quiet. I saw a flock of pigeons take off from 2 blocks away. Kevin, the delivery driver, dropped the small box containing the single merino wool sock. He actually yelped, a small, high-pitched sound of shock, and stumbled backward, clutching his ears. The sound continued to decay, a long, shimmering, resonant hum that lasted a full 10 seconds before fading into an unnerving silence. Kevin stared at the gong, which was vibrating visibly. Then he looked at the rope he'd just pulled, as if it had betrayed him. He looked at the little sock box on the ground. He snatched it up, sprinted back to his van, and sped away, forgetting to close his side door. The man was psychologically scarred by an act of acoustic notification. My heart was pounding. I felt the adrenaline rush of a bank robber. I had done it. I had replaced Karen's annoying doorbell with a noise so massive and profound, it instantly reset the entire spiritual equilibrium of the street. The silence was the loudest part. But it didn't last. 60 seconds after the gonging, the high-pitched, angry bark of Karen's little terrier started up. And then, Karen herself. I saw her emerge from her front door. She wasn't walking. She was marching. Her face was a study in pure, unadulterated fury. She was wearing a visor and carrying a small, digital voice recorder. I stepped out onto my porch, trying to look like a man who had just innocently received a pair of socks. I stood next to the massive, gleaming gong. "Mrs. Henderson," I said, with a sickly, sweet smile. "Did you enjoy the acoustic notification? That was the delivery of my parcel." Karen stopped 10 feet away, breathing heavily, like she'd run a marathon of complaint. "Leo Maxwell," she hissed, her voice tight with controlled rage. "You think you are clever. You think you have found a loophole." "A loophole, Karen?" I complied with the letter of the law. I removed the electronic chime. I replaced it with an acoustically pure, visual notification instrument. Are you claiming the gong is electronic? I am claiming this primitive instrument of sonic terrorism is a violation of every single bylaw regarding noise, visual aesthetics, and neighborhood harmony. You have shattered the peace. Shattered the peace for 3 seconds, Karen. Your grandson Timmy rides his dirt bike up and down this street for 6 hours every Saturday. That is a sustained nuisance. This is a single, concise note, and it's only rung when I have a visitor. Is there a specific HOA bylaw that prohibits single-note musical instruments on the exterior of one's home? She stabbed a finger at the gong. "It is not an instrument. It is a weapon. I have the decibel reading right here." She waved the voice recorder. "Decibels are meaningless, Karen. Look at the code. Section 3A covers sustained, repetitive sound, lawnmowers, loud music. Section 3B covers repetitive chimes that cause undue stress. The gong is neither. It is a single, transient event. It is over before the bylaw applies." I was channeling my inner property lawyer, and it felt magnificent. "You're going to be sued, Leo. You are going to face the full legal weight of this association. I will have a restraining order filed against that monstrous piece of brass." "I look forward to our day in court, Karen," I said, genuinely enjoying myself, "where I will introduce into evidence your 10-page document detailing the trauma of the unsettling chime. Until then, you have no recourse." I complied. "The gong stays." She glared, turning red, before finally spinning on her heel and marching back, the little terrier yapping furiously in her wake. I had won the dialogue, but I knew the fight was far from over. Not 10 minutes later, the police were back. This time, there were 2 cars, and they were parked officially, lights flashing, not just a casual drive-by. Karen had executed her threat. 2 officers approached the porch. Officer Miller, the same seasoned veteran who had shrugged me off before, looked even wearier. Beside him was Officer Jones, the rookie, looking terrified. "Mr. Maxwell," Officer Miller said, his voice flat, "we've received a very, very specific complaint about a seismic event caused by a musical instrument. Officer, I'd like to state for the record, this is a non-electronic, low-decibel visual notification device. My neighbor is simply having a difficult time adjusting to the new acoustic profile of the neighborhood." Officer Miller sighed, his eyes fixed on the gong. "Look, Mr. Maxwell, I'm required to investigate a complaint of disturbing the peace and unnecessary nuisance. I need to understand the nature of the alleged nuisance, which means—" He trailed off, looking at the gong with profound reluctance. "You want me to ring it, don't you?" Leo smiled. "I highly recommend it, officer. For evidence, you need to log the acoustic signature." Officer Miller looked at the rookie. "Jones, you record this? Log the timestamp." Officer Jones, trembling slightly, pulled out his phone and started the video. Officer Miller, with the air of a man about to sacrifice himself for science, walked up to the gong. He looked at the rope, took a deep breath, and gave it a short, professional pull. The result was slightly less powerful than Kevin's terrified tug, but still monumental. Boo! The sheer, sustained resonance enveloped the entire porch. The sound hit Officer Jones squarely. He physically jumped backward, dropping his phone, which clattered on the ground. Officer Miller stood there, motionless, his face registering a mixture of shock and reluctant admiration. He waited for the massive sound to finally dissipate. "Okay," Miller said, rubbing his chin. "That is certainly a sound." Officer Jones scrambled for his phone. "Sir, I think my ears are ringing. That registered as loud." "It's a single event, officer," I interjected quickly. "A single, beautiful, transient note. It's not sustained. You have no noise ordinance against single sounds unless I'm ringing it repeatedly, which I assure you, I am not." Officer Miller leaned in, his voice low. "Listen, Maxwell, you're playing a technical game, and you're winning the technical game. But I still have a complaint, and I have to satisfy it. You clearly installed this thing to be loud and annoy your neighbor. That falls squarely under creating an unnecessary nuisance." He pulled out his citation pad. "I'm giving you a ticket for $50. No jail time, no removal order, just a simple nuisance citation. You can fight it in court, but I have to issue something." I nodded, feeling a glorious sense of validation. The ticket wasn't a loss. It was a receipt. A small price to pay for the right to own the most aggressive doorbell in the state of California. "Thank you, officer. I appreciate your thorough investigation. If you're ever in the area after 10 p.m., feel free to swing by and ensure I haven't struck it in violation of the nocturnal noise ordinance." Miller just shook his head, handed me the slip, and walked away, pulling the shell-shocked rookie with him. The gong stood silent, gleaming, and victorious. I fought the $50 nuisance ticket and the HOA fine the following week. It was a minor event, a small claims court appearance for the police citation, and a quick, tense board meeting for the HOA fine. The court appearance was brief, but glorious. "Judge, Mr. Maxwell, are you contesting the $50 ticket for creating an unnecessary nuisance?" Me. "Your Honor, yes. The alleged nuisance is my doorbell replacement, which I installed only after my homeowners association deemed my previous, normal electronic chime an unsettling, tinny resonance that lowered property values. Judge: And you replaced it with a large gong? Me: A non-electronic acoustic notification device, as required by the letter of the law. I acted in strict, if dramatic, compliance. If the previous noise, a gentle 1.8-second digital jingle, was a nuisance, surely the new one, which is only struck upon necessary visitation, cannot be perpetually deemed a nuisance. The judge laughed. He actually laughed. He looked at the citation written by Officer Miller, which simply stated, "Acoustic overkill." "Case dismissed," the judge ruled. "I find no continuous nuisance. This is a property dispute, not a criminal matter. Mr. Maxwell, I suggest you consider a simple, solid brass knocker next time." "I'll take that under advisement, Your Honor." The HOA meeting was less fun, but equally effective. Karen showed up with Gary Sr. and a lawyer. I showed up with the dismissed court citation and a printed-out copy of the municipal noise ordinance. Karen's lawyer: Mr. Maxwell's gong is a clear violation of Section 6D, which prohibits non-standard exterior adornments that negatively impact community aesthetics. Me: Section 6D also exempts architectural accents and artistic installations. Since the gong is currently registered with the HOA as a mobile art installation, their own rules prohibit them from forcing its removal. Furthermore, I have the original violation notice, where Mrs. Henderson complained about the jingle's tone causing stress. I removed the jingle. The stress is now caused by the visual presence of the gong, which is not covered under Section 3B, the sound ordinance. The HOA board, tired, miserable, and intimidated by the absurdity of the entire situation, voted 3-2 to dismiss the fine. The gong had won the legal battle. Tony and Mike returned the next day to install a small, weatherproof plaque I'd commissioned. It simply read, "The doorbell." Tony looked at the shining gong, the victorious plaque, and the perfectly repainted area where he'd dented the siding. "So, you won," Tony stated, counting the bonus I was handing him. "Technically and acoustically," I confirmed. "The gong stays." "Best 3 days of my contracting career," Mike admitted, shaking my hand. "We're telling this story at every job for the next 20 years. We built a doorbell that makes cops jump. That's a legacy." They drove off, waving. The absurdity tax was worth every cent. The most surprising development was the neighborhood's reaction. The initial shock wore off, replaced by a grudging, then enthusiastic acceptance. The gong wasn't just a doorbell. It was a symbol. It was the physical manifestation of fighting back against petty tyranny. I started getting thumbs up from neighbors I'd barely spoken to. People who didn't live on the street would drive by slowly, pointing. The gong became an unofficial landmark. Anecdote 1. Kids. A group of 10-year-olds on bikes would stop every day. One time, a little girl bravely walked up, gave the rope a small tap, not enough to activate the striker, just a tink, and whispered, "Hello, Mr. Gong." It was glorious. Anecdote 2. Delivery drivers. After Kevin, subsequent delivery drivers were cautious, but they were also excited. They'd filmed themselves ringing it. One pizza delivery guy, after giving it a full, enthusiastic pull, handed me the pizza and said, "I wait all week to deliver to this street, man. That bong clears my head." The most touching sign of community acceptance came during the summer block party. My next-door neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, walked over, grabbed the rope, and gave it a solid, sustained throom. I rushed outside. "Mrs. Rodriguez, what are you doing?" She smiled mischievously. "It's 7 p.m., Leo. The party is officially starting. I figured we needed a grand announcement. Everyone knows what the bong means now." The gong had transitioned from nuisance to community bellwether. It was used for block party announcements, goal-scoring celebrations during outdoor soccer games, and once, hilariously, by a cat that figured out how to bat at the rope, demanding to be let back in. And Karen? She was defeated by her own pettiness. The day she saw Mrs. Rodriguez deliberately ring the gong to announce the block party, something in her broke. Her power was neutered. Her complaints, once effective, were now simply seen as the ravings of the woman who had inadvertently gifted the neighborhood its greatest asset. A week later, Gary Sr. was putting up a small, discreet "for sale" sign. I never spoke to Karen again, but I saw her loading boxes into a moving van 3 weeks later. She kept her head down. She didn't look at the gong. She didn't look at my house. The protagonist's reflection. I sit on my porch, now having a beer, the 4-foot gong gleaming beside me. It's more than just a doorbell. It's a testament. I spent $3,000 and risked a misdemeanor for a piece of metal, but what I gained was far more valuable. Freedom from tyranny, the respect of my contractors, and the most magnificent, absurd conversation piece in the Tri-County area. The gong is the true spirit of the neighborhood. It's big, it's loud, and it only makes a noise when it absolutely has to. I finish my beer, content. Just then, I hear a light sound. Not a full thrum, but a delicate, almost accidental tink, like someone has brushed the edge of the brass with a fingernail. I turn my head and see a final, light tap on the brass. It's Gary Sr., driving his own car this time, pulling out of his old driveway for the very last time. He sees me, raises his hand in a wave, and gives the faintest of smiles. He rings his own gong one last time, with a small, quiet, triumphant tap, and then he drives away.